Some might argue this is a tough time to launch a new car. What are your expectations for this new vehicle? How do you think it is going to sell in the coronavirus environment?
Yeah, first, thanks very much for having me. And as you all know, the industry has been shaken by the recent crisis, but we still believe it's a proper time to launch a car like the new C4. The market has evolved a lot. We're talking purchase pattern, we're talking powertrain, but I think the demand, and we saw that in the last weeks, at least in continental Europe, has been extremely strong coming out of the crisis. Obviously, the type of transportation, the distance of travel will evolve, the economic powers will be, at play, but we still believe that there's a lot of demand for individual mobility, for, the protective cocoon a car is, and obviously, we're launching this new C4 with a fully electric alternative, which we believe will address the growing, concern or interest for sustainability.
Clearly, European car sales just got really hammered in the first half of the year. They've started to rebound. Give me some sense about what sales are like now and then how that feeds into your expectations for your new EV.
There's a number of things that happened in the European markets in the last weeks. Obviously, progressively, many countries came out of lockdown. The duration of lockdown was a difficult time, but also a time where a number of customers have made up plans, but also accumulated some savings. So what was quite surprising for us is the speed at which orders came back. We measure orders, we measure deliveries, and obviously deliveries were for purchase what were made mostly before the crisis, but orders in some countries, one of them being France, by the way, have peaked and have ramped up very quickly. The other thing that came into play is many countries have decided programs for kickstarting the economy, many of those focused with clean mobility, and that obviously has had an impact in the market. So today, very dynamic market. How long that will last, to be honest, nobody knows. But we think we're in a period in time which has been very heterogeneous and a bit hectic in the last month, and now we are living through a very high demand.
Vincent, can I take you back to what you said just a moment ago in your first answer? You talked about the car being a protective cocoon. Are you saying that you think people are going to swap public transport for cars? Is that going to be a driver, to excuse the pun, for car sales?
That's something we don't have enough depth of analysis on. What is really clear, and I think in many large cities, the constraints we're seeing today in terms of public transport usage have an impact on people's mobility. One of the consequences being remote work, okay? But it's also true that during this period of lockdown, all of us have discovered the value of acquaintances and individual mobility. So I'm not saying there's a direct, obvious, or measurable at this stage trade-off between public transport and individual transport. It would be very ambitious of me to say this at this point, especially because we've been there only several weeks. But what is clear is we all valued the freedom of mobility and the ability to go and meet people during the lockdown. So that's the point I'm trying to highlight, which is this unique feature of a car, which is your freedom of mobility, has probably moved up in the list of things you really cherish.
So picking up on that, I know you still have only a few weeks of data, but when we get a vaccine and everything gets okay again and we feel comfortable using, say, buses, do you expect that to then dent demand for car sales? How do you see that evolving?
We have a lot of things at play, obviously in Western Europe, but more generally around the world. One of them is the very strong demand driven by regulation, but also driven by genuine citizen demand for clean mobility. We have this enhanced attention to freedom of mobility and the ability to meet the people you love, particularly exacerbated by the last 3 months of lockdown we lived. We have a number of cities which are changing their policy about transportation. So this is having an influence in favor of clean mobility. sometimes challenging traditional mobility. So where all of this will land, especially in the likely environment of an economic tension, I would say, is not clear. What I'm trying to say is there will be, I believe, a very interesting focus, and we see orders today, but I think we'll continue seeing orders for a freedom of mobility.
One of the things that the European Union, the European Commission is trying to do at the moment, Vincent, is encourage Europe to take another look at hydrogen. You are standing in front of an electric vehicle, an EV. Do you think Europe has done enough on hydrogen, and do you expect your company to do more on it going forward?
I think there's many answers to your question. First, today, at the current state of technology and economics, I have the pleasure of being in front of a car we're launching, the new C4, which offers traditional combustion engine, both gasoline and diesel, and a fully electric solution, which we believe answers 95% of the expectation of a traditional C-segment customer. So that's the current state of the car industry. What I think is always important when you look at source of energy is, do we know how to produce that source in an economic way? Do we know how to transport it? Do we know how to store it? Do we know how to distribute it? Gasoline was, and diesel were the traditional answers over the last 120 years. Electricity is reaching that point. Of course, we've been able to generate electricity. It's everywhere. But being able to use it in an economic way, having the right charging, having the right powertrain, is just coming to a point of similar, what we call cost of ownership. Hydrogen is a next frontier, whether it's 10 years, 20 years. I think many people are asking the question. So the PSA group is investing in developing hydrogen, but today the solution we have is electric.